Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify Nation, and if you're new here, welcome. In this episode, we're going to look at VLAN configuration. We'll be discussing VLAN ranges on a switch, VLAN creation commands, VLAN port assignments, and finally, data and voice VLANs. This episode is part of my series on switching, routing, and wireless essentials. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. Switches are capable of having over 4,000 VLANs, 4,096 to be exact. When you first start up your switch, there are several VLANs that are created. We have the default VLAN. VLANs 1002 to 1005, those are set up for legacy VLANs. That they're reserved for legacy VLANs. Typically, they're not used anymore in today's networks. VLANs 1, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, they're created automatically and you can't delete them. They're always going to be there. If you see VLANs 1, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005 and you're not using them and you try to delete it, you're going to get an error. It's not going to let you do it. That's okay. That's what they're there. Now, all of this VLAN information, it's stored in Flash, and the file name there is VLAN.dat. This is where all of your configurations are in here. VTP is a protocol we can use to coordinate and propagate VLANs to other switches. We can go in there, we can set it up, you create a VLAN on one switch, it'll send it out to all of the other switches in your network. Once again, we have 4,096 VLANs. VLANs 1 to 1005, those are what we call in our normal range. This is where most VLANs are set up. This is what most companies use. VLANs that go from 1006 to 4095, that's what we call as our extended VLANs. This extended VLANs, they're typically used by service providers, your internet providers, the people that give you your connection to other networks. They'll show up in your running config. They support fewer VLAN features, but they require VTP to be running. And typically what happens is you set up VTP on your server to accept connections from your service provider for those. Once again, 1 to 1005, there are normal ones. That's what you're going to use. Unless you're a service provider, then you're going to use 1006 to 495. How we create these VLANs, we go into global configuration mode, and then what we do is we start off with the word VLAN, and then we put in the VLAN ID. Once again, that's between 1 and 1005. You put that in there, it creates the VLAN. Notice our prompt now changes. It says we're configuring a VLAN. At this point in time, we can name it. That's typically all you do is you go in, you create the VLAN by using VLAN and then the number of the VLAN, and then you name it. Whatever you want to call it. This is where you'd call it the data VLAN. This is where you'd call it HR. Whatever you want to call it, that's the name you would give it. Here's an example of creating that. What we did is we created a VLAN, we gave it VLAN 20, and we named it student. That creates this VLAN on the switch here, on switch 1. We created a VLAN and we named it. That's all we do with the creation of that. Then, once you've created that, we can then assign it to ports. We can go ahead and assign it to the port. And how we do that is we go into the interface from global configuration mode. So we type in interface, and then we put our interface ID in here. And for example, this is fast Ethernet 0/1. This is gigabit 0/0/2. That's what you'd put in there. Once you're in the configuration of that, you can say, okay, we are going to use the switch port, because we're dealing with all these switch port technologies. We're going to change the mode of it from access. Once again, you have the choice here that we're either an access port that supports one VLAN information that connects to your end devices, or you could specify trunk at this point in time. Here we're going to specify access. This is going to connect to a computer, to a printer, to a voice over IP phone. Once you've set that mode of that port, then we can go in and set switch port access, and then we want to say that it's a VLAN and what VLAN is it. And we created VLAN 20 on the previous slide, and so we go ahead and put VLAN 20 in here. Here's the example. We go into our interface, Fast Ethernet 018, we tell it we want it to be the access port, and then we tell it we want it to be part of VLAN 20, and that assigns this port right here, F0/18, into VLAN 20 for us. Create the VLAN, then you assign ports to the VLAN. If you like this episode on VLAN configuration and you get value out of it, and depending upon the platform you're using, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. Doing this supports the channel, which in turn helps me bring you more great content. Subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell. You can also visit my website at KevTechify.com for all of my details and how to get these episodes in video and podcast form. When we're talking data and voice VLANs, what happens here is we usually have one port on the switch. Right here on switch 3, we're taking Fast Ethernet 018, we're plugging one cable into it, that cable goes into the phone. The phone then gets a port. You typically don't see that port because it's all internal. That stays to this port, and then there's another port where we can connect our PC. What we have here is we have voice and we have data, all going through this one connection to switch 3, and we need to go ahead and we have to set those up specially. And if we remember the rule for a physical port on a switch, it can belong to one data VLAN, and it can belong to one voice VLAN if you are connecting a voice over IP phone up to that. Here's an example of how we set up the data and voice VLAN. Once again, notice we created our VLAN. That's what we're doing here. We create VLAN 20 here. We give it a name of student. Then we go in and we create another VLAN. We don't have to exit out. We can just say VLAN 50 by entering that in. If it doesn't exist, it creates VLAN 150. We go ahead and we name it voice and we exit out. What we did here is we created two VLANs, VLAN 20 with a student, VLAN 150 with voice. After we've created it and named it, we can then go and assign the interfaces to those VLANs. And this is how we go ahead and do this. We go into the interface here. We go into interface, Fast Ethernet 018. We set the mode type of that port to access. Once again, our choices are access or trunk. This port is connected to end devices, a voice over IP phone and a computer. And so we're setting it to an access port. Then we go ahead and say, okay, we're going to set it to access VLAN 20. This takes care of our data portion. Then we're going to go ahead and in here enter in our quality of service. What this quality of service is doing is setting up our voice VLAN, is setting up priority for our voice traffic. And then we come in here and switch port. And instead of setting the mode, what we're going to do is, okay, we're going to say voice traffic. We're going to send that to VLAN 150, and it sets that up to send that out. If you already set up VLAN 20, it's going to go ahead and put that port into VLAN 20. It's going to assign it to the voice VLAN. If you're on a newer switch and that VLAN doesn't exist, you didn't create your VLANs up here, you didn't go ahead and name them. If you just jump right down here and put this port into a VLAN that doesn't exist on newer switches, it will create it automatically for you. Now it varies from switch to switch, operating system to operating system, but it could do that. You may not have to do these upper steps here, but it is a good practice to go ahead and create the VLAN and then also give it a name. That name helps you because you may have 2-3 VLANs on your network, easy to keep track of, but if you got 50 VLANs on your network, you're going to need help remembering what that is, and this is where that name comes in. To verify our VLAN information, we use the show VLAN information. We have a couple choices here. We have brief, that gives us a nice little brief table on our information. We can specify what specific VLAN we want to look at, or by VLAN ID, or you can specify it by name, or you can just ask for a nice little summary of that. First example here is show VLAN summary. We have this nice little summary. We have 7 VLANs that are existing, number of VTP VLANs. Basically, we've learned this through that VTP protocol. The second example here is show interface VLAN 20. And so we're showing the interface of VLAN 20. Remember how we created the VLAN? Well, we're going to show all the information associated with it. And just like any other show interface command, we can see that VLAN 20 is up. We can see that the line protocol is up for us. If you assigned a port to a VLAN, you can go in and you can change it. That's what's nice about this virtual VLANs, is it's all done virtually. It's all done in the software itself. It's done in RAM. And if you enter in a port into a VLAN, you can go ahead and you can change it at any time you want. You can just log into the system, go in there, and you can either take it out of its VLAN by entering in the no and then putting the command you want to take out. So no switch port access VLAN 20, that'll put it into the default VLAN. Or you could go and just enter switch port access VLAN and then put the VLAN you want in there. Let's say you want to put it into VLAN 30. Just go ahead and put switch port access VLAN 30, enter it in there. It'll move it to VLAN 30. You can also use the no switch port access VLAN without a number, and it just removes it from the VLAN, puts it into that native VLAN at that point in time. Here's an example on the left. We did interface FA18. We've been working with that example. No switch port access VLAN right here. Takes it out of VLAN 20, puts it back into VLAN 1 right here. You have that information right there. Then down here you can do show interfaces, and you can verify that it is in the access mode VLAN of 1, our default VLAN. To delete the VLANs on your switch, what we can do is you can put in no VLAN ID. So you can put the VLAN ID in there. You can put like VLAN 20. What that's going to do is delete VLAN 20, and it's going to assign all those ports that were in there into the native VLAN. If you're trying to permanently delete all VLANs, what you have to do is delete the VLAN.dat file. It's found in Flash, and so either you enter in flash:VLAN.dat or enter in delete VLAN.dat. You can hit enter. It'll delete that text file because all of those settings are kept in a text file in the RAM, and so it persists through rebooting. If you want to delete all the VLANs and basically reset it to factory settings, you do an erase startup config, delete that file, and then you delete the VLAN.dat on a switch. That'll erase any VLAN configuration. The problem is, if you want to get it back to initial factory settings, what you have to do is then delete your VLAN.dat, erase startup config, and then reload your device. You have to reboot your device. And at that point in time, you will be basically doing a factory reset to your switch. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on VLAN configuration. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, and of course, depending upon what platform you're using, please give a 5-star rating, leave a comment, click that like button. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All of my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com, and you can get all of these episodes in video and podcast form. In the upper right is my playlist for my series on switching, routing, and wireless essentials. In the bottom right is one of my favorite episodes that I linked just for you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on switching, routing, and wireless essentials. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.